So, Squid Game Season 3 is finally over, and I have to say it was pretty disappointing. Now, this isn't a terrible finale by any means, this isn't like Game of Thrones level of bad, but it's just underwhelming. But first, I want to point out some positives. For one, I think the performances are still amazing. I love what Ji-hong does as Gi-han in this season. You can really see that he is shaken up by the events of the last season, and he rarely speaks for like the first 2 episodes. He just sits there in silence as he stares at Daeho. He conveys so much emotion without a shred of dialogue, and I also really liked the first game with hide and seek. The tension for this game was pretty high as the hiders constantly had to keep switching doors. The deaths were also pretty impactful for these games, and it just had me on the edge of my seat. But after hide and seek, the season just lost steam. The next games aren't really as fun or creative, and when Jun-hee gives birth to the baby, the show just becomes really predictable. It's just Gi-han protecting the baby from the rest of the games and the players. You can immediately tell what the show is building up to and how it's gonna end, and I think one of the biggest issues with this season is just how underdeveloped and rushed it is. It doesn't really feel like a new season, it just felt like a continuation of Season 2, just like Season 2 Part 2. The season premiere literally picks up right where Season 2 left off. The season premiere isn't grandiose or new, it just kind of starts like a normal episode. Which just goes to show that Season 2 shouldn't have just ended abruptly right in the middle of a season. They should have just released Season 3 a month after Season 2. Like, imagine if Stranger Things Season 4 just decided to wait 6 months before releasing the final episode of Volume 2. It would just kill all the hype and momentum, and I feel like that's exactly what happened with this season of Squid Game. They should have just taken a similar approach because Season 3 is pretty much just Season 2. They're still in the same games, they haven't left the games, it's still the same old stuff. And for that 6 months of waiting, the payoff for this season was pretty weak. And I don't really think that people would have been complaining this much about Season 3 or the ending for that matter if Season 2 had just been released as a full season. The show also continues with by far the lamest subplot ever, the subplot with the cops. It's just so boring and uninteresting and it builds up to nothing. And by the time Jun-ho makes it to the island, his team is already dead and the games have ended. We never really get a satisfying payoff for Jun-ho and his brother, the frontman. He just shows up and yells why, and then the frontman just leaves and the island self-destructs. And if you remove the subplot from the show, nothing really changes. It's still about Gi-han and the gang playing the games. And we would still reach the same ending regardless, and I just think that this ruins the show's pacing and it makes the rewatches of the show really awkward. Because the cop plotline doesn't really amount to anything. But I will say that I thought that the resolution for the games was good, even if it was predictable. I love Gi-han's final speech about humans before he falls to his death, and I like how he sacrifices his life for the baby to win. He still kept his promise to Jun-hee, and at the very end, Gi-han proved his point and he won the games in his own eyes. And he showed the VIPs and the frontman that there's still more to the people besides their greed and cruel nature. I think that Gi-han's death was a fitting end to his character. I just wish that the show had spent more time trying to resolve all the other subplots because we still don't really know a lot about the VIPs. We still don't really get insight into the frontman. But who knows, we might get a frontman spin-off in the future that answers all our questions. The only real info we got for the frontman was a very brief and surface level flashback where we see how he won the previous games. But besides that, we don't really know why or how he became the frontman. All we know is that the previous frontman gave him a knife and he killed all the players and that's how he survived. And I was really hoping that now that Jun-ho finally made it to the island, we would finally get a satisfying payoff between these two characters and a resolution for the frontman's character, but we never really got that. But by far the biggest issue with this season is just that the main goal of Season 2 was never even accomplished in this season. Gi-han originally set out on this mission to go back to the games in order to stop them, but by the end of the season we're pretty much just left with the exact same situation that we were in Season 1. The games are still continuing and the only difference now is that the baby won instead of Gi-han. But the characters are still back to the same status quo with no answers really. I get that the whole point was to show that the characters can't stop the games and that the games shall inevitably continue to happen no matter what, but it still left me thinking that this season was pointless and shallow, which is not a good final impression you want to leave on the audience. I just think that the show overstayed its welcome. The show should have just been a mini-series with one season because it really struggled to retain that same sense of mystery and excitement that the first season had. The show just kept spinning its wheels as opposed to a show like Severance, which I mentioned before in my previous video. I really liked how Severance reveals the mysteries to you in a very gradual way while still leaving certain things lingering to keep you thinking for the next season. But ultimately, the main goals of the seasons are accomplished. In Season 1, the characters discover their identity and they start to rebel against Lumen. And in Season 2, Mark finally saves his wife Gemma from Lumen. I just wish that Squid Game Season 3 had taken a very similar approach where they resolve all of the major overarching goals. And to top it all off, the season ends with the frontman driving to LA where he sees another recruiter recruiting people for the American Squid Games. And that's how the series ends. I just think that the show has been milked enough already and I'm not really interested in the American Squid Games show, mainly because we are too familiar with the style of the games, so I'm not really going to have that same sense of excitement or wonder that we had for that very first season of Squid Game. But like I said, this isn't an egregiously bad ending. The games are still cool to see, the acting is very solid, and the set design for the games is still amazing. It's just that this season just feels really underwhelming and unrewarding for the 6 months that we had to wait for. It's a very safe and predictable ending for the most part, and that's pretty much it. And I'm gonna give Squid Game Season 3 a final verdict of a 6 out of 10.